everyone, and welcome to Cyber Insanity. I am one of your hosts, Andrew Berkuta, and
Angelo Longo.
go. The
Coming
good
to you.
echo effect.
Breaker.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. As you know, there's a lot of heavy lifting and things that go on in the podcast, and so I want to shout out to our stunt coordinator, our chief herder of cats, Gabriella, and I know she works tirelessly behind the scenes. So shout out to her. And it's also a test to see if she's listening in on this podcast. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us, folks. This is our People Process Technology part 3 of 3, where we cover the technology part of things. And so, I guess I have to open this can of worms, but I'm going there, Angelo. Have you seen growing up the Justice League and all those superhero type things?
Yes, I was a Rumpelstiltskin fan. So
Well, this is going to be it's a very heated topic, and I know that there's been a lot of movies on this, but Batman, right? What does
Yeah.
Batman have to do with cybersecurity? I'll get to that in a second. But first, my question is Batman a true superhero?
Ooh, that's dropping a bomb.
I'm dropping a bomb. So here's my argument.
You're going to answer that question first.
I'll throw down. So you have Superman who has super strength, can fly, can do all this stuff. You have
Basically
Wonder
godlike.
Woman who has the super strength of a superhero. You have your Thor, who's kind of like a Nordic god. You have I'm not counting Jan and whatever the other one, the Wonder Twins, right?
Oh,
No,
Wonder Twins powers activate.
oh no, form of a bucket and form of water. Seriously, that's not a super strength. Anyway, all right. That aside, Batman. I would argue without his utility belt and his gobs of money, is he really a superhero?
But he does have the one thing.
What?
I'm Batman.
Oh, well, the voice in the mask. Okay.
Yeah.
But that really begs the question. He's got tools to do his superhero
Agreed.
type stuff. Now, if arguably you had the money of Bruce Wayne and the resources of Wayne Enterprises, and I guess you could throw a little bit of Tony Stark in this too, in this kind of argument. I'm really going on the edge here. A lot of money, a lot of tools, and they make themselves into a superhero. Does that make you a superhero by nature?
Oh, wow. Do you ever see Deadpool? Stop there.
The Wolverine's got those little things coming out. Now he was engineered too, but it's all attached. It's not a tool.
I was thinking of Dan.
Okay.
Yes. What do you do? I'm Dan.
Yeah.
Whatever that guy's name was.
Well, okay.
No, but yes, I agree. Tools don't make the hero, but you're intimating, I think, something else.
To use the parlance of one movie where they say manners maketh a man, does tool maketh a superhero? Does tools make a cyber professional?
The tools can exist
Wow.
outside of a program, outside of a hero, outside of a person. They, when Batman takes off his tools, is he still Batman?
No, he's Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Which is my argument.
Wait, he's Bruce Wayne? What? So
I'm Superman. It's the glasses, right?
I think there was a Jimmy Kimmel when he meets them both. He goes, he sees them both. Wait, he puts it. Say I'm Batman, and then he goes, "You're Batman," and he takes it. You're Superman.
Well, there you go. I guess all this to poke the bear a little bit further.
Yeah.
From a cyber perspective, are we nothing more than Bruce Wayne? And if we can afford the tools, we therefore become the superhero of our company. How much
So,
does technology play a part in this? Because we're talking people, process, and technology.
yep.
It's that third leg of that three-legged stool.
Well, let's face it. In the end,
Yeah.
beyond the procedures, beyond the policies, there has
Okay.
to be something doing something.
Okay.
Um, is it somebody running around an environment, locking down workstation by workstation,
Right.
and making sure that it's secure? Or is it some type of unified, manageable infrastructure that allows you to do that in mass? The end result is, or hopefully is, a secured environment. The issue at
Right.
hand is the difficulty in executing on that. But just because you have 12 billion tools doesn't mean you, one, have them deployed, two, have them done effectively, and three, are monitoring them in a manner which allows you to actually see what's going on. Tools begat tools begat tools, for the biblical parlance, I guess, in that old English.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Right. And that's a great point because too many tools, uh, to your phrase about complexity, your quote
mhm,
about complexity, too many tools confuses the issue
it
because
does.
then you are unsure of which, if there's a discrepancy, so there's no correlation there, it could cause um paralysis as far as making a decision or providing a course of action.
Hmm.
Um, then that could also include risk. It could provide either incorrect information because you haven't interpreted it correctly or understood what the tool is capable and not capable of.
Hmm.
There's a training component to this. So, people, process, technology, we're picking on the people part of this, but the process of things, it could confuse or negate your method of investigating, of remediating, of enumerating.
Hmm.
When
In the
when it when it's where do you go with all the technology though? I mean, when is it a good where's a good balance and where's a bad balance?
Well, part of that comes down to your security program and your security plan. If you're a small business, you probably have no security program nor plan because you don't know what you need, how to deploy it, and how it should be set up. You get in touch with somebody like me. I'm going to start guiding you through a process to get you to a state, but there's a post implementation state in which there's the need for somebody to take a look at and understand what's occurring in your environment. That is generally prohibitively expensive to an organization of small size. Generally, there are cases in which there are products which include services and products like that that allow people to look at what's going on and see. But the real issue at hand is, what do you need for what you do, and what
Yeah.
you do needs to be built off of the data you play with, who you work with, your regulations that are affecting you. All those things affect what your requirements and needs are. So when we look at this, tools are great.
Yeah.
I'm a proponent of Microsoft Defender, and I'll probably get hate mail for that. Be that as it may, they've done a decent job as of late,
As of late. Yep.
yeah, with their endpoint product. I'm not saying that they've done a decent job with their security as a whole, because we all just witnessed the stupidity of somebody. Excuse me, not stupidity. I take that back. The Somebody didn't verify that there was parity between the infrastructure they built as a demo or as a dev environment and the environment that is actually production.
Right.
So stupidity removed, non-verification. But the reality is, when you get down to it, their product is decent from the point of view of the end user experience, the end user, um, and the end user protections. Is
Yeah.
it the end all be all? No. But for companies that don't have a big budget, don't have a big thing, they need something that gets them in through the door and gets them somewhat protected. Then you start building what we call a program. But a program is basically how you operate and what you do.
Mhm.
It doesn't get back to those tool things. Tools do a job, and They need to verify they do your job and work from there. But the reality is, tools are there to provide you something.
Yeah.
They are not a panacea. Just because you have stuff enabled, installed, doesn't mean everything is protected unless you can verify some of those things. And once you verify them, you're verifying them against a set of vulnerabilities and such like that are out there. But when you start looking at the overall, basics need to come to mind. A small business needs
Yeah.
endpoint protection,
Okay.
basic firewall, etc. Go.
There's two things that I want to unpack here. All right. So a lot of people look at Windows Defender as a good starting, and it's not a bad starting point at all. I
No,
mean, give you a lot of stuff in the package to point you in the right direction. The problem with, I think, Defender, and one of the reasons why you see so much push toward other products is um there's a fluidity with their products, with their suite of products, right?
yes,
They are moving things from one console to another. The consoles don't seem to be um there seems to be some underlying connectors there, but they launched the other console. Why do I need the other console? Well, why do I have to set this feature? For what purpose? There's some things that confuse people more than align them to a security goal.
I call
I'm
that
not
fickle,
saying
by the way.
it's what
Fickle.
okay, I may be fickle, but
No, no, not
but
you. The Microsoft product.
okay, okay, yeah, okay. So I may be a little bit more discerning as far as what I'm looking for in a product or a suite of products, but I want to have some unified way of and consistent way of getting from point A to point B in my security posture. And if I open up another console and it's worded differently, there's a little disparity to me in those descriptions, or maybe in why do I need, for example, why does Azure have to be turned on? Never
Yeah,
had to turn it on before. Or why does why does um Prevail have to be on there? Uh I don't know. Why does a DLP package now have to be turned on or this policy be set? And then the scare tactic is when they start setting it, they say, "Well, that's going to change your standard configuration. Is that what you really want?" And then if you say, "I don't know," and you go to a website that starts giving you every reason to do this or that or the other, and you're going, "I don't want a book report. I don't want a book report. I need advisement.
right.
I need to get through the FUD, the fluff, the junk to get to where I need to get to, because my score says I'm 50% there to my security goal, and it should
Right.
read 100% or
Yeah.
whatever your target is for your risk. So, um, so that's one.
Mhm.
Then you talk about, the advisement services, at some point coming into being. Um, these are people that can show you the battle scars. These are people like yourself that can walk you through and saying, yeah, you really don't need this. This setting can be set right here. You don't have to open up yet another console. And let's improve this score methodically using what tools you do have. And again, Microsoft provides you a suite of tools to get you pointed in the right direction. But even there, you have to get the right flavor of their O365.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you
It
don't, you don't get, oh, well, I wanted to deploy to my laptops. Well, I'm sorry, you wanted Intune, so that's not available unless you go to this package, which begs the question here. Every company has a different size profile that they would fit. There's a small company, medium-sized company, large company, right? Microsoft have been trying to fit in their packages, their O365 packages to fit one of those three areas, small, medium, large.
Mhm.
Um, but what's the right flavor of that? And they give you a chart and you can download the chart. But I think more so when you look at tools, because a lot of times the technology comes in great capability. It's like, okay, well, you don't get this tool in Office 365, but you need to supplement with a third party of somewhere. Is that the right tool? Do I need a few tools? Where's the balance for a small, medium, and large company? Like what would be the things that you would need for a company that's very basic? I may be where my PII is not that prevalent, maybe compliance is not in the forefront, although it would be nice to go there because maybe I'm a supplier to somebody and they're requiring this. But as a small company, there has to be certain things that I have to provide. There's a level of care, if you will. What should that look like?
Well, in the end, you have the endpoints, you have the network, and you have authentication as being three major points of reference in this entire thing.
Okay.
Endpoints need to be protected in some way or fashion that not only has the protection active and doing something, but also reporting someplace so somebody else can know something bad may be happening. The network, however that's formed, whether it be, the connection to Office 365 or the infrastructure that exists within an office building, someone also needs to be able to see that stuff. And then in the end, authentication. One of the really important things is authentication. It needs to really come and look at how the organization in and of itself authenticates to whatever is the server of truth or the system of record. The issue at hand is someone needs to say these are the people who are employed and authorized to use this. There should be some type of thing in there that like a group or a control that allows you to say these people in and of themselves can access this and these people can access this.
Right.
But the real big thing in authentication is not only creating an account, assigning an account properly, is to get some type of multi-factor authentication enabled in anything. That is a baseline for existence at this point in time. It is not a new thing. It has been around. I don't know. I remember using multi-factor authentication in the 90s. So
Right.
this is not new. If you don't have it, you are vulnerable. Period. There is no maybes. And so really in the end, protecting the endpoint also in my eyes is a server. So when we talk about that, a server and a workstation, they're computers. You protect them.
Okay.
If we start talking about SharePoint, which is going to be a conversation that revolves around Office 365, storing stuff in the cloud, Dropbox, SharePoint, etc., all the same thing.
Right.
Google Drive. These are locations to store data and files. You need to make sure the access to that is secure because that's probably your bread and butter data. 2, you got to make sure that access is monitored.
Yeah.
Because that is not your data center. That is not you don't have control over anything except the access you provide within the software interface that they give you. So the SaaS, software as a service or platform as a service, or however you want to phrase what Office 365 is. The end all be all is we need to control access, we need to protect the endpoints, and we need to protect the network. Once we get to and that entails, by the way, all that is to protect the data, the thing you're trying to protect in the reality, the business process, the data, and all that. That's the big thing you're trying to protect. That's what a basic organization needs. But when we step it up, when we say, okay, I have all this data, this data is flowing back and forth, it's sensitive and stuff like that. We need to start taking a look at that data flow. What do you share with people? How do you share it? Is it encrypted? How does that encryption occur? What who has access to it? How is that data restricted? Now these things become more important because now you're exposing your organization. You could be this small in an organization. I'm squishing your head. No reference. Okay.
I know that reference.
But you could be very small, but you still need to take into account your data privacy, data processing of a personally identifiable data, personal payment card data, and or health provider data. You need to take you don't have to be big to have this issue. And that's something that, you jump up from the basic business requirements very quickly because you're either storing PCI data, PII data, HIPAA data. Then you start needing to take into account other things in protecting that data in your environment.
Aha. Okay. So here's the pivot point that I hear you saying.
Mhm.
So just as a recap, small business doesn't have that much complexity. Endpoints, i.e., my machines, computing machines, that includes my MacBook, Windows, servers, if I have those need some type of protection. Traditionally, we looked at antivirus, but you're also suggesting monitored. It has to be looked at. So
Mhm.
that puts us in the EDR capability, XDR
Exactly.
capability, MDR type capability, uh, managed preferably. That somebody
Yes.
is monitoring it, watching. If a threat happens, they can clamp down on it. The second thing that you mentioned was there's a network component to it. May not have that much complexity because our infrastructure is not that developed or needed to be developed. We just need the computers to talk to the internet, which then brings on the cloud services or shared drives or that fluffy stuff that we can beam our stuff in. You mentioned, Dropbox and all those other places that we can put proposals to our clients or whatever so they can download it nicely and everything. But that needs to be monitored too. That needs to be ensured that your information that you have, because you do have customer information in there. There's
Mhm.
their addresses, maybe their EIN numbers or their potential business numbers or certificate numbers, whatever it is that you may need to protect. And if it's a user or a client that has a social security number, that better be protected. So now that's our basic level of protection and care. But now you're transferring into, and now you're transitioning into somebody who needs a little bit more than just the basic level of care. Oh, and of course, multi-factor authentication. That's a
Right.
must
It's
for
basic.
identity, to make sure that we are saying who
And,
we are and we're
and as
not.
a point, and a point of reference for multi-factor authentication,
Yeah,
SMS challenge token or
that's on my
number,
cell phone. I get the text,
yeah,
right?
that in and of itself is is compromised for the most part. It
Oh,
is better than nothing, but
yep.
it is not considered to be a secure, way to do things.
So
You know,
multi-factor authentication, you're looking at an application such as Microsoft Authenticator,
Google Authenticator.
Google Authenticator, or whatever the appropriate name of it is, or a third party specific tool that provides that level of um, verification.
Like some password managers actually
Right.
include it. Uh, RSA if you want to spend a lot of money. So
Interestingly enough, I see the iPhones and Samsung coming out with enhanced type of security where they're using uh
enhance.
enhanced. It's
It's
enhanced. But Microsoft came out with an interesting document as of late that they are saying that frequent password changes are more detrimental than having a very hard password to guess. A very
That's not just Microsoft. That's actually NIST.
yeah,
Uh, so what they're saying is go away from password changing and go to multi-factor authentication. Since multi-factor authentication for all those people out there is basically an extension of your password. You have your password that you know, and
yep,
then there's an extension that's always changing. The
okay.
beauty about that is it changes every 30 seconds, whatever the time period is. And that in and of itself is basically your password plus whatever this is. That extension, that change can become more and more complex as time goes on. And your password really becomes it becomes less relevant as time goes on. Because the simple fact is your password is just the entree to getting into the system, which actually authenticates you.
Uh,
And then your secondary piece of that, the multi-factor, something you have, something you know, something you are. These are the things that help you get through the next step of the authentication phase.
Interesting. So that's the necessities. That's your basic
Hmm.
on-ramp to proper security, security posture, and hygiene. But now you started transitioning somewhere. And this is where you started adding things like a compliance or regulation.
Hmm.
Started talking about data flows, right? What's important? What's critical in my data?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
now I may be, for an example, a healthcare provider like a doctor's office where I have to maintain that data, the integrity of the data. I may
Right.
be a law firm where I have chain of custody of data or of information that needs to be protected for my customer's sake or for the case. I may have information if I am a lender in the mortgage industry that may have social security numbers and such. Um, Now you're talking about data. So what can we look at data as far as tools? What traditionally are tools that we would look to protect the data work stream, that data workflow?
Well, the data work stream. Well, so you have to start looking at DLP, which is not a single topic.
Data
It's
loss prevention.
data loss prevention.
Right.
It is discovery, it is classification, and then there's the action portion.
Okay.
Everybody thinks you just buy a product and everything is well, but you gotta know where your data is,
Yeah.
what it is, and then take action on it.
And how are you
There's
using it and who has to access it too?
well, that's it. Yeah, even beyond, yeah, that's so yeah. All those things you have to take that into account. Data movement and loss. But another place people miss,
Yeah.
they have structured data, which
Okay.
is data within process and procedures. I ingest data through a particular product. That product processes it, and I utilize it for these purposes. When it becomes unstructured, hey, marketing needs all the emails and names for this particular, for these 5,000 clients. I write a report. Now that data becomes unstructured. It's now outside the system and is being utilized for other purposes. What happens to that data? Where does it go? Where it happens? Where does it go? Classic place you see this. I need to submit all the people to the insurance company for my organization and all their classic details. How
Mhm.
do I do that? Where do I store it? How do they get it? Typically, they get it in an Excel spreadsheet. And
Yeah.
that Excel spreadsheet goes to the insurer. The insurer processes all those people and goes there. How is it sent? Well, we email them.
Email it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you just created a huge problem because let me tell everybody in the audience, email sucks for security. It is terrible.
Ah, ah,
Is that
ah,
email? If you compromise an email address in an organization and get access to someone's email, you also get access to all the emails that were sent to them, which probably means if they were copied, just copied on
mm,
that Excel spreadsheet, they now have access to all that information. So you may
mm,
think it's inconsequential that an email account is compromised, and I would say that highly depends on what you send and use email for. If you send sensitive data over email, stop, cease, and desist, and go back into your email and delete all that sensitive data, unless you can say it's been encrypted, and that's decent. But there's better ways to do this.
yeah, I mean, there's more advanced things than encryption, like tokenization or whatever, where the data itself is obfuscated and
Right.
replaced with a token that represents that data.
It's one
Um,
way to do change some of this data. But in the case of a insurance
yeah,
company, they may need real social security numbers. They
yeah,
may need some of these things. So that's a process that needs to be vetted out between the company X, and company Y, the insurer. Yeah, like that. My hands are
yeah,
opposite on this
right.
camera.
Obfuscating, right? A Batman. No, no, okay. So, so now you're looking at getting deeper, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like peeling an onion. We've taken off the basics of what you need.
And by the way, I want to make
Yeah.
this is where most people want to bury their head in the sand and don't want to know. But guess what doesn't leave you? Liability. You are still liable for this. It doesn't matter if you don't know, you
Nope.
own it.
Okay, here it is. Big flashing lights. Disclaimer: you doesn't matter if you were aware or not. Ignorance is not a risk. A risk. Emergency
Remediation.
strategy. Right. This is not a strategy anymore.
Yeah.
And the government actually has been cracking down on this in 2023, 2024. They're putting more teeth on those bites of not knowing, or I
Yep.
didn't that negligence. They call it negligence. Even if you
Yep.
didn't know, it's negligence, which
Hmm.
that's an argument for a law firm. But it really comes down to um trying to understand and do put in a plan and a program to help drive you toward that compliance.
Right.
So okay. So from a compliance perspective, um, there's technology to help us there too. Even if we don't know, there's experts in a box, as they say, right? There's
Yep.
some type of tool out there that can potentially get you a better interpretation of, let's say, NIST, for example, for lack of a
Hmm.
better example, NIST or GDPR or any one of these other places that have some type of regulatory requirement. Okay. So you can get a package, a tool that can interpret those into actionable type of settings,
Hmm.
actions, and policies, or some type of training.
Yes. Well, you're
But
answering
it
me.
only goes so far. But it only goes so far because what I've seen is these are great, but you still need to know what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean,
This is
just be,
kind of the utility belt, right? This is you need a superhero still in there
yeah.
to be able to use the tool effectively.
Yeah. Because let's face it, there's so many different things that are happening here.
Okay.
Protecting an environment from the point of view of the endpoint is different from protecting it at the network level. It's different protecting the data in question. Is different. Uh, is different from protecting a number of different things. The issue at hand is when you look at the organization in question, you need to determine the process procedures that they need to follow
Mhm,
so you can dovetail the the configuration, the security into that environment, and then post haste take that and basically meld the security policy, meld the security settings
mhm.
into something that is usable, but then understanding what's coming back from it only comes after use.
Yeah.
Oh, we have this outside. You never find out everything day one. Never. Because here's the problem. You walk in, you start doing some interviews, you start having some conversations, and you find out about this app and
Right.
this process and this thing, and then suddenly you're bringing up, well, how you're transferring data over here. Why do you do that? Well, because they need it over here. Well, how are you securing it? Oh, we're not, or we are, but we think we are, or whatever. So has anybody verified that? Do you know the security of the companies you're working with, that you're sharing data with?
Mhm,
All these things become hard to know, and to track and understand how you play against a security policy, play against a security standard becomes very difficult unless you know the whole picture, unless you know where your data flows. There's something called a privacy impact assessment, which is trying to look at the data flow over time of what's happening in your organization, of how your customer experiences the data, sharing events, and how you share their data in a way. The reality is, when you look at those, that needs to be built with the care of the data of the customer in mind, the business process being maintained, and then also delivering a product which drives home the information security, or drives down the information security risks that you may encounter, to something that is palatable by management. And here's something that everybody's heard of. Well, I shouldn't say everybody's heard of, but when you find risks, we just said you're liable for everything that goes on in the environment. Yes, you are. You have mitigating things. You can put controls into place. You can buy insurance. And the last thing you can do is you can accept the risk. Risk acceptance is when all else fails, it
right.
is bigger is better for the business to continue doing to continue doing work in this slightly risky way, hopefully slightly risky, than to completely mitigate the risk because you have satisfying controls around it. But what happens when that risk, that vulnerability is exploited? That's
That's
a sign
interesting.
of, yeah.
That's
That's where the rubber meets the road and people don't like to be.
yeah, and there was, every once in a while in LinkedIn, right? Somebody puts a chart up there.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cool, tools to use or
Yep.
this category of cybersecurity or this thing. One thing I found very interesting was somebody put something on information security risk register, right?
Mm-hmm.
They said, what do you have to do with risk, right? So I'm just going to read this very quickly. It must be unique to enable tracking. So you have to
Right.
track each and every risk. You have to enhance monitoring reporting, right? This it has to the description introduce clarity. It has to make sense of what you're trying to do as far as your description.
Right.
Consider the risk in absence of controls.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have no controls, well, do I accept the risk? Do I shut it down and completely what? Highlight the controls addressing the risk,
Yep.
right? The risk after considering the controls, you have to understand what it is. The controls to be introduced to address the risk.
Yep.
Then you have to assist in completing the mitigation action within the reasonable time frame. So
Yep.
reduce the dwell time there for that risk. And then responsible for monitoring, identify the person responsible for monitoring the risk and leading the implementation of the mitigation action.
Agree.
All of that to say is when we talk about risk on this program, all this stuff is running in the back of your head, isn't it? Is like these things got to be unique. We got to be able to chop it, slice it, dice it, be able to interpret it correctly. We have to be able to assign somebody that. And sometimes if we don't have a control,
Yep.
we have to accept that risk at the end of the day. And then
Yeah.
assign somebody to be the bullseye wearer of this risk. That's Andrew's interpretation of that list that I just read.
And that's exactly what it is. The bullseye wear.
Right. Who's wearing the bullseye?
Yep.
So is it Batman? Is it the cybersecurity professional who has their utility belt full of tools? Um, it may not be. It
Well,
may be that executive that has to walk back to the board and say, "Folks, you didn't make a decision on this, so this is a risk that's just blaring in our face, and now we are wearing it. And there's no technology to mitigate it. There's no controls that can turn it off or make it small or reduce the dwell time. What say you? Do you accept this risk or not?" And you put your head in the guillotine and saying, "Do you pull the cord or not?"
you know what's great about this is when you start looking at this, a CISO, a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, should never be accepting risk themselves. They
Okay.
should be presenting the risk
All
as this is what it is. The
right. Mhm.
business itself needs to accept the risk. That means somebody there needs to step up and say, I understand it is risky. I understand the risks that have been presented, and I accept ownership of the target. You can place it right on my forehead, and we're good to go. That should be a scary thing.
It should be.
What I find is a lot of people do this risk acceptance without true consideration. Now, is the CISO not explained it properly? Have they just not bothered to read the document? I have a feeling a CISO would probably explain it pretty properly. The issue at hand is, will the person understand the
Mm.
risk that they're taking on? You click on EULAs and do you accept the cookies and things all the time?
Yeah.
Do people understand what they're clicking on? Do people understand? This website wants to know where your location. Do people understand that? You
Right.
know, um, I'm using it, something that probably people do, but that's kind of what you're doing here a lot of times when you say I accept.
Okay.
And and I think the important point about this whole conversation is with people, process, and technology. We're on the technology piece. The
Right.
technology is there in a cybersecurity standpoint to help mitigate and reduce risk in the environment. If one chooses not to purchase the technology to help them do that, then someone needs to be informed that that lack of purchase opens them up to this risk. Well, purchasing it helps remediate this risk. They need to do a cost benefit analysis saying, I can, it costs me 3 times as much than I make on this particular item. And so I can't really secure this because it doesn't make any sense because it costs too much to secure. Okay, that's understandable. My question back to you is what is the legal exposure outside of what you make to that? And can you actually afford that answer based upon just what you make on it? I mean, that's one thing. The second thing is how do you get and deliver that security when you can't afford to secure it with some type of technology? Is there other ways you can secure it? Can you reduce your exposure? Are there things you can do in a manual sense? These are all things that you go through. When you talk to somebody like me, I walk through and try to build an understanding of the environment, what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And then once you get to a point of, okay, I feel good about this, then we can then start talking about the further utterances that we need to actually go through. So,
So let's kind of take a little different approach here. So when we look at tools for our company, for our business,
yeah,
they have to accomplish a few things, right?
right.
Sometimes you buy tools for reconnaissance purposes. Sometimes you buy tools for reporting purposes. Sometimes you buy tools or technology for um, correlating all the disparate uh, devices, or trying to
Hmm.
pull in and try to give you that one pane of glass. You hear a lot of people, like a dashboard of some type, or a SIM, however you want to pronounce it. I call it a SIM just because I that's what
I've
I
always called it a sim. So,
so okay. So this one pane of glass. So that's maybe a useful tool because that gives you the visibility to look at um, one pane of glass of all
mhm.
your aggregation places. Firewalls can report in, endpoints can report in, um, data, logging information, all this stuff gets pulled in, and some type of recommendation or some type of assistance may come out of that SIM to be able to say, based on vulnerabilities or based on something, this is what the occurrence is. This is how visible it is in your environment. This is how prevalent, and this is maybe some action items that can be done to it. And oh, by the way, we're going to track this so that your dwell time is minimized, your remediation is tracked to a number or something like
Yeah.
right, and it's assigned to somebody to do that. Well, that's a great tool to have. Okay, then we look at protective stuff, right? Your EDRs, your XDRs and stuff that go back to providing this. And there's these suites of packages have so much stuff embedded in them. They give you a lot of bang for your buck.
Right.
Important thing here is it's not just a countermeasure you put on your computer or device or whatever, but it's a monitoring and a managed type of thing, because it always usually comes down to, does it tie back to a SOC of something, a security operations center? Does it tie back to some managed security services provider, or some type of level assistance to augment your staff?
Yep.
You may not have it. That's an important thing. Okay. So now we start looking at the abundance of tools. Because if you talk to somebody who's a pen tester, for example, and you ask them, well, what tools do you get to this particular conclusion? They start throwing out a lot of tools, but they only have that one little tool that does that one little device or one little test or whatever.
Hmm.
And then you get into an overload of tools very quickly. You have a list of impressive tools, and in their own right, they are impressive.
Agreed.
But now it's like, if I don't understand what tool to use appropriately, my utility belt of tools, go back to Batman, if I don't know how to use that utility belt, um, I'm fighting a fire extinguisher is a great example. If it's not for the right category of fire,
Yep.
You're doing more harm than good
Yeah.
because, well, this is good for paper and wood and stuff, but it's not good for an oil fire. But I just sprayed it, and now all of a sudden my fire just spread out further. I didn't read the didn't read the label. I didn't understand the fire extinguisher that I bought.
Yeah. Looks like throwing water on a oil fire.
Right.
So,
I mean, where is enough enough? And when do we just say uncle and say I need expertise to come in?
well, this is really what where I think somebody should be be evaluated. So one of the things that we do is we come in and say, hey, let's take a look at your environment. Let's get you an idea where what things are affecting you and what we can help you with. Because the important point here is if we can determine what we can help you with, we
Right.
can then take you and give you a plan that says, hey, this is my next step. This is where I'm going to be able to deliver biggest bang for my buck in my environment. Now, is it engaging me for a year, or is it or buying a product, or is it delivering stop using email for sending sensitive stuff? All those may be part and parcel to it, and some of those may be part and parcel to it. The issue at hand really comes back to the fact is you need to take into account, you need to take some action to make a determination of where you stand. And a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people fall into the case of, I'm just going to spend my ignorance here and say, I don't know. And that's a huge problem in and of itself.
Yeah.
So we need to make some determinations where the next step is for the customer. And so,
But if we don't know it,
yeah.
right? I mean, then option paralysis or
Oh,
an indecision is a decision, right? And
absolutely.
like you said earlier in in this program, not not acknowledging it, not knowing it is not an excuse anymore.
Correct.
So if you don't know,
What?
get somebody who does. Get somebody who can advise you appropriately and maybe mentor you to understand what you have, how to manage what you have, and how to scale
Yeah.
that for your business.
It's huge. Because if you don't have expertise, you can't say that you did the due diligence
Right.
to protect your environment.
And that goes for
Eh,
tools too.
yeah,
Very much so. If you don't
yeah,
know how to use the tool, you may have like I remember years ago there was a product called Silent Runner.
yeah.
Uh, it was by Raytheon, then and then it was sold off to the commercial side of things. But this thing came with, or you had to buy the
Hmm.
optional 3D mouse, and they even give you a tutorial how to go up and down and over. The whole premise of this is you can replay an attack and see it in a 3D correlated graph and where these attacks were going throughout
Yep.
your environment, which was all cool and everything. But you know what? I almost needed a PhD to use it.
Hmm.
And it's like
Complexity.
complexity, right? So so with tools, there is a level of complexity, and if you don't understand, if this is not natively your language, cyber is not your language,
Yep.
this can be very confusing. It looks like on a checkbox that you bought the right tools, but just like anything, it'll sit in the tool case. It won't be used. It won't be used for what you bought it for.
Agreed.
And that's a source of frustration. Again, not using the tool, not employing the tool properly dings you. It's against you in an investigation or in a risk uh, I guess calculation. It goes against you if you don't know how to use it or it's been inappropriately employed.
Yeah. Listen, when you get down to it, everything's going to play against you or play for you based upon how much you prepared.
Right.
Your preparedness really gets vetted out in times of trouble. And that, how you the way you interact with your insurance provider, how much due diligence you did beforehand, who you're working with, what you tried to do, what protections you put into place, all that will come out in the worst of times.
Yeah.
So do your work right now And so when you get to that place where the bad thing happens, you're protecting your environment, you're protecting your assets, you're protecting your business
Yeah.
because you've done what was required. You've maintained, you've established, maintained, and vetted that your environment is maintaining some type of security standard and process and procedure. So, in the end, we as an organization, we as a company, we as anything need to sit down and say, we have done our best. And we should be able to show that through evidence,
Yep.
documents, through process visualization, and be able to deliver on a a a security product which is the reduction of risk to acceptable levels for the business to operate.
Right. And in this case, for the kind of to wrap this series, the tool is great to have. Nice to have. It gives you information. It helps you do things in a more repetitive and predictable manner. There's a process behind this.
Okay.
And as Angelo just said, you have to have a process in developed, already vetted, already prescriptively put through it through its paces to test it. There's people behind that.
Yep.
Right, and you need that expertise, and it really comes down to, in the wrap up of the series of, it doesn't matter if you're small or a medium-sized company or a large company. People, process, and technology have been the mainstay in security as far as focus areas because it holds true through the test of time. Right?
Yep.
You need the people to be educated. You need the people to have the skills to be able to run the tools. You need the people to develop the process and be able to work through and live that process. You need the process to be able to prescriptively give you the what happens if bump goes in the night. To
Yep.
be able to follow a path, those breadcrumbs, to be able to have a successful outcome. You need the tools to be able to investigate, to be able to document, to be able to automate all of this type of activity and be able to protect you in the middle of the night. It comes down to people, process, and technology. And we've made this series, I think, in three parts to dissect each one of these three, and today's was technology. But from a summary perspective, Angelo, people processing technology still works.
Oh yeah. I mean, when you get beta, I said this, you start reducing the complexity of everything we're trying to do and start looking at it for that. But people, process, technology,
Yeah.
confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You match it, and boom, you have what makes you secure. But you need to understand the first to
Mhm.
apply the second.
Right.
So that's we you keep adding all these
Common
technology.
sense.
Yeah,
It
but
seems
the
like common
technology creates confusion if you
Yeah.
don't understand the technology, where it belongs, how it fits, and how it integrates into the overall program. If you do know that, then you can say that is effectively helping me. So
And there you go. So, Angelo, I think now more than ever, your quote, it really resonates, right? Share us that quote again, if you will, as the final,
yeah.
your final.
Again, don't know whom I stole this from, Bruce Schneer, Mr. Schmidt from the federal government. But I believe it is complexity is the enemy of security. If it's too complex to understand, you're probably not secure.
Yeah, absolutely. We had the KISS principle, which is keep it simple, stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that really gravitates to this complexity quote of yours, and I think it still gravitates with such vigor. We have to keep our heads about us, right? Which really, which kind of brings out my quote, which is the best security device resides between our ears if we use it.
Yep.
We've got to use our heads in this. We have to be able to not offload our brains to technology, not offload our thinking and reasoning to a process and not think that is it still appropriate. We have to train our people. We have to train our brains to think of new ways of addressing new challenges. AI being prevalent now. We have to be one step ahead of the threat actors out there.
Cool.
But we gotta use our brains. So, Angelo, thank you so much for this series. It was very insightful, and I think our listeners and watchers will appreciate this, folks. Please link to our YouTube channel, like, subscribe. This really helps us get you the better content, the better topics, guest speakers. We're going to have some coming up. So please do keep your eye on our podcast. We try to release these at reasonable times so that you can keep up with the latest trends. So thank you once
We should
again.
have like a link, like maybe right here.
Uh,
It says click on that, and you go to that. Yeah, somewhere.
the link,
Gabriella.
Gabrielle. Make magic happen. But thanks to Gabriella for her tireless efforts on putting these content out and making us sound good and look good and make sure our stunts don't kill us. So stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you for being with us and practice safe computing. Thanks all, folks.
See you guys.